The Rose of Versailles began with the serialization of the title in the Japanese magazine Margaret in the early 70s. The manga was later given an anime adaptation in the late 70s, with some of its themes from the books being changed or censored for TV. The story's main protagonist was originally the historical figure Marie Antoinette, with its co-lead being the fictional soldier Lady Oscar. As the story progressed, Oscar would be shifted towards the forefront of the narrative because of popular demand from audiences. Since its launch, the series has expanded with additional chapters and a spin-off by Ikeda, while a movie is on the horizon as well. Despite the passing of time, the story and themes of the Rose of Versailles anime and manga are still impactful and relevant today. In this video essay, we'll explore the message behind Lady Oscar's story, characters, and how that's represented within the series. Let's get into it. Several decades before the French Revolution, General de Jarges, desperate for a boy, decided to pass the mantle to his fifth daughter, and in turn, she would have to live her life as a man and carry out the family legacy through military service. Lady Oscar would be raised to be well-versed in all of the things expected of noblemen, swords, etiquette, etc. Ironically, due to her not being considered a real man by her peers, very few of the social privileges that were often given to male nobility could she experience. A few notable examples being passing on her name, title, and land to whomever she married, which greatly limited her romantic prospects as a result. Additionally, many potential partners didn't know what to make of her gender representation and sexuality. Meanwhile, her androgynous appearance made them question their own gender and sexual expression. For example, the orphan peasant girl Rosalie falls in love with Lady Oscar but cannot pursue a relationship with her due to her being a man in only name and occupation. Their relationship isn't provided as much depth in the TV show as the manga is based upon, with the former giving it more precedent within the plot. To Rosalie, Oscar is one of few people that treats her with dignity and respect, despite her social standing or life circumstances. She willingly acts as a mentor figure to Rosalie by tutoring her in academics, etiquette, and swordsmanship, while inviting her to live at the de Jarges manor as well. As a result, Rosalie's feelings towards her aren't just solely of gratitude or admiration, but grow into adoration. On the other hand, Oscar views Rosalie as the calm amidst the storm. Unlike with others, with Rosalie, she can express the various sides of herself freely and drop her expected masculine persona. However, whether or not Rosalie's affection was requited by Oscar was left to interpretation within the anime series, while the book implies that it was reciprocated. In the novel, due to the time period, Rosalie pines for her for years, and Oscar feels guilty about it because, in her words, "I can't do anything for her because I'm a woman." In this instance, by can't do anything for her, she likely means giving Rosalie a name, title, land, or future, which were qualities that often came along with noble marriages at the time. The best thing Oscar can do for her is let her go and give her a way to be married, which is ultimately what she decides to do. Therefore, she faces a dilemma. Even though most of Versailles residents know or acknowledge Oscar's gender identity, she still faces adversity inside and outside of the palace due to it. Whomever she's with or not are posed with the choice of either breaking societal expectations or pursuing other romantic options. For instance, Rosalie chooses to love her despite her being a woman, but cannot act upon it. Meanwhile, Fersen, Antoinette's lover, doesn't like her because he considers her to be a man. He explains to Oscar that if he had met her as a woman rather than a man, then maybe things would have been different between them. With even Fersen's sister Sophie commenting on Lady Oscar's gender or sexual ambiguity, saying, "Women like that don't live long." After many years of loyal service and very little social life, Oscar feels lonely and hopeless in love, which leads her to believe she'll never marry as a result. During that time, if a woman wasn't married by their mid to late 20s, they were considered a spinster. The term spinster implied that they were not able to marry because they had already missed their chance to do so. Towards the end of the story, with Lady Oscar around 30 and unmarried, this is an aspect that's not only weighing on her mind, but her father's as well. Even though she had various admirers in her life, most did not come to fruition romantically due to sociological factors such as their class, position, or gender. With the end of her unrequited infatuation with Fersen, her father, feeling guilty that she basically must live her life alone due to him, arranges for her to marry one of her fellow soldiers, Count Victor Ghirardella. Similar to Oscar, his sexuality and gender presentation is ambiguous as well. The new episodes of the manga from the 2010s elaborated on this idea. He is a bachelor that likes to read and has little interest in much outside his books and duties in the Royal Guard. Since he was young, girls found him attractive, but some spread rumors about his sexuality due to his passive nature and hobbies. Oscar would decline his proposal, to her father's dismay, and chooses to fully immerse herself into her work. Even though they had similar social standings, and in theory, it would have been a beneficial match for both of their families, Oscar turns him down because of his disconnect towards the lower class. However, Andre, her friend and vassal, is who she eventually ends up with. He represents the few people that liked Oscar for her, that didn't run away because she didn't fit the expectations and norms of the time. This is shown even when they were children sparring in the fields. Andre played with her as an equal, as if she too was one of the boys, despite that likely being frowned upon. When they grew up and Oscar became captain of the Royal Guards, he voluntarily took a back seat to her success, which some more insecure men would have felt embarrassed by. To Andre, serving her wasn't just duty or obligation, but a part of his identity. He was the quintessential sidekick, always willing and ready to accompany Oscar, offer her support, or put his life on the line. Aside for challenging the expected gender roles of the time with his passive attentiveness and her active diligence, the androgynous nature of Oscar's gender identity adds an ambiguous element to their relationship as well. For example, both of them wearing what was considered male clothes, having masculine occupations, and performing what was perceived as gentlemanly behaviors expands upon the gendered ideals of romantic partnerships within the period. With Andre's friend and fellow soldier, Alan, taking notice of this and initially saying he didn't understand what Andre saw in Oscar, describing her as a manly woman. Therefore, their union goes against the grain because it doesn't conform to the societal structure of the time by transcending each other's class, rank, and gender, with even their marriage being held symbolically through their time spent together rather than lawfully through an institution. Even though he made some questionable decisions or actions throughout his journey, Andre acted as a companion to Oscar in arms, in the fray, and ultimately in life. This video is brought to you by the like and subscribe button. Your support makes videos like this possible. Thank you. Now back to the prepaid programming. The French nobility in the 18th century were granted many privileges in exchange for their service. To name a few, they had the right to hunt, to wear a sword, and were excluded from taxes. In return, it was mandatory for nobles to serve in war, fight, and possibly die in favor of their king or queen. Additionally, even though France had more women soldiers than much of Europe at the time, their gender still would have presented them with many challenges in what was widely considered a male role. For instance, Lady Oscar is the leader of the French Royal Guards and Marie Antoinette's bodyguard. At the beginning of the story, she is a picture of the ideal soldier, devout and ever ready to serve her queen, and by extension, her country. The level of respect, attention, and regard she has for Antoinette is akin to love. Every moment of Oscar's life is based upon her, from the time she was born, Her father chose her gender and trained her in combat with the goal that she would eventually serve in the royal guards and the royal family. Besides for taking part in battle, she was expected to handle Antoinette's private affairs and act as her personal advisor, which were aspects she spent much of her job doing. Therefore, her marriage in life was figuratively to her duty to Antoinette and by extension, her country. To Antoinette, Oscar represents not just a guard in her service, but a genuine friend and ally amongst many deceptors. She acts as stability and comfort amidst the shifting landscape of her life and nation. In a sense, she reciprocates Oscar's level of duty and allegiance as a result. However, eventually Oscar has to differentiate between love of her queen and love of her people. With the flames of the French Revolution simmering in the background and societal ideals changing, she begins to question what role she plays within all this and what should she be doing. As Lady Oscar grows up, so too does her role and the implications of it. She becomes aware of the struggles amongst the populace through Rosalie and André, which contrasted heavily with the opulent lifestyle that Antoinette or many of the nobility were living, including herself. Another issue she has to contend with as a result of her soul-searching is her relationship with her father. The father complex is a concept by Carl Jung that is often explored in literature. Jung felt the father archetype was within all people, despite whatever relationship they had with their biological father, and that it played a primary role in the pursuit of a sense of self. Oscar, for most of her life, has followed her father's guidance with few objections, but when society changes, so does she. She doesn't want to just be complacent in the action, but a central figure. When she decides to be demoted to army captain, a position usually not for nobles, her father is confused and upset. General de Jarges symbolizes the nobility of the past, who are more or less disciples of the royal family with little to no objections. Oscar, on the other hand, depicts not only the troubles of the time, but the ambitions of the future. She feels like a figurative doll in the royal guards that mainly combats personal politics rather than warfare. Oscar wants to command amongst the men, while aiding her people in the process, rather than just the nobility. Therefore, it was inevitable that their goals were going to come to a crossroads. She then goes on to compare her body and identity to the god of war. In her opinion, it's a genderless figure that hears the call of battle and willingly goes wherever it takes them. It's a god that lives as long as its sword can fight and shield can endure. That's how she wishes to be and to live. This is the first and last time in the story we hear what Oscar thinks about her gender and her father's choice in the matter. He accepts her change of position and ideals until eventually he can no longer do so. Even though Oscar lives as a man and occupies male spaces, she is not always accepted within them, including within her own regiment. Most of her male soldiers do not respect her, not only because she is a noble, but notably a woman. Throughout the story, Oscar's public persona is depicted as being the man she thinks people want her to be versus who she actually is. She often suppresses the qualities that she considers to be feminine, such as her vulnerability and feelings. Therefore, Oscar finds her masculine qualities to be comforting and uses them as a shield from her troubles or insecurities. The same can be said for how she handles her new leadership position. Alan and the other guys are constantly testing her and trying to get a rise out of her. As a result, they make it clear that Lady Oscar will have to prove worthy of their allegiance. Through bouts of strength and mental gymnastics, her patience, will, and masculinity are challenged. Additionally, their reasons for fighting and ideals act as a foil to hers. She serves with duty and distinction to the system as a whole, while they simply fight to support themselves. without loyalty to the societal structure. Besides for causing her grief, they broaden her perspective on the world with their experiences and struggles, which adds to the growing list of reasons why she will eventually break away from the royal family. As Oscar grew into her new position and Antoinette into her role as queen, the chasm between them was no longer avoidable. In due course, she must say farewell to Antoinette and their decades-long partnership. Oscar arranges their last appointment to discuss the state of the country and to plead that she not combat the rebels, which Antoinette explains that she can't do. As a response, Oscar cries because she knows her own values don't align with Antoinette's anymore, and that she can't follow through on her initial promise to always protect her. She also understands that this ordeal is bigger than her, and that even she isn't strong enough to protect her from it. This is one of the few times Oscar shows vulnerability with her and drops her typical stoic demeanor. Over time, she inadvertently started showing others the various qualities of herself, rather than running away from them. Initially, Oscar didn't want to serve Antoinette because she said she didn't want to work for a woman. Despite her words, it's implied that she was actually afraid to work for her because it would entail living as her male persona full-time, without a choice in the matter, while making her acknowledge the insecurities and feminine aspects of herself in the process. Antoinette, saddened that this is likely the end of their friendship, and recognizes Oscar's sensitivity, sees her off with the hope that they'll meet again one day. Similarly, Oscar must say goodbye to her vassal and companion, Andre. With him becoming blind, Andre could no longer accompany her in battle or protect her from what was to come. Even though Oscar can fend for herself most of the time, what she realizes upon losing him is that he gave her the motivation and support to keep going. In essence, Andre was her strength, and without him, she only has the will to lead one last battle, the Battle of Fort Bastille. When Oscar was young, becoming a noble was the answer some people sought to end their troubles, even if it came at the cost of their dignity or morals. However, on the cusp of the revolution, the people were taking matters into their own hands and didn't want to have to rely solely on the nobility anymore. Men and women yearned to be in the forefront and challenge their place within society. Specifically, great strides for women's and LGBT rights would be accomplished upon the enactment of the French Revolution and the years that followed. Unfortunately, Lady Oscar wouldn't live to see and experience its progress, but she would die ushering in the new era. Unbeknownst to Oscar, through her life and efforts, she was the revolution she had been waiting for. The Rose of Versailles, with its narrative and themes, questions not only the society it was written within 50 years ago, but offers critiques that are still relevant to the world today. It reflects on the challenges of a woman occupying a male position in a time that didn't allow for such gendered nuance. For instance, when Oscar was young, her father chose her gender representation, which would set the course of both her life and death as a result. General de Jarger's decision to make her a military officer would present her with many obstacles, both on the battlefield and in her personal life. However, like the god of war, she willingly gave her body to the fray, while letting her sword and shield determine her fate. In the end, she chose to die the way that she lived, at the helm of battle, with justice as her guide and soldiers by her side.